Good afternoon, class. The session is being recorded. I ask you to uh, mute your audio video. Don't put anything in the chat while I go over the recording and this practice test. You can even change your name to your initials just if there's a privacy issue. If a question comes up, if you could wait until the last when we are done with the recording, I appreciate that. If you have to ask, that's fine. Again, remember, this is being recorded and it's going to be posted for all students. So again, good afternoon, class. We are looking at college algebra practice test one. Sometimes we call it a sample test one. Sometimes we call it take-home test one. It basically what we cover for the first exam, the first module. Okay, chapter 2, equations and inequalities. Okay. All right, we are going to answer the following. Find the distance between the 2 points, okay, and come up with the midpoint. So to understand the concept, let's quickly recap how we, come up with the distance formula. Okay, I'm going to remind you of this formula. The distance, it follows Pythagorean theorem, class, okay? I hope you remember a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So this distance plus this distance squared plus this distance squared is this distance squared, and then you take a square root. Therefore, d is x sub 2 minus x sub 1 quantity squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 quantity squared under the radical. So that's where the equation comes from. And so 4 minus minus 5, that means 4 plus 5 and square it. We are looking at this. Always start with formulas. Plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1. So 2 minus minus 6, which means 2 plus 6. You're going to square that. The rest is very straightforward. You add them up, you square them. This is 9 squared 81. This is 8 squared is 64. You come up with 145. Square root of 145 with a bunch of decimals. When you answer that, this is the exact answer, everybody. Okay, you want to stick with that. If they ask for decimals, they ask you how many decimals, and then you round it accordingly. Remember, when you round, you go to the next one to make a decision. So be careful with that. The next one is asking for the midpoint. And again, how did we come up with the midpoint? We basically add up the, x's, we divide by 2, the same thing for the y's, and that's the midpoint. Therefore, if I want the x coordinate for the midpoint, I add up -5 and 4 divided by 2. For the y, I add up -6 and 2 divided by 2. Okay. All right, so here's the formulas, okay, and of course these are the answers you had seen already. So for part A and for part B, very straightforward. I'm going to stop my video in case, because sometimes it helps in a sense that your screen won't get blurry. Okay, so I don't have to send out the video. Okay, so that's fine. So let's move on to the next question. All right, so here's a simple application problem. A man drove 10 miles directly east from his home. Okay, so we are going to go east. Okay, how much? 10 miles, okay. Then made a left turn. So if we are going this way, this is the left turn going up, okay. And we're going to go up by how much? 5 miles. So if a road was made directly from his home to his place of work, what would its distance be? Let's see how the setting looks like. It's a good practice to do the setting. So we are going this way 10 miles. We are going up 5 miles. So a straight would be the hypotenuse. And that's Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and B are legs. So this is 10, this is 5. We are going to evaluate that. And this is 100, and this is 25. So the square root of 125. And again, with a bunch of decimals. How many decimals? It really depends on the question, as I mentioned. Okay. So you do it accordingly. So that's part A, and you're done. Part B says, if the road was made in the, in the previous exercise, how much shorter would the man's one-way trip be? So we want to go from point A to point B, let's say. Okay, let's call it point A to point B. Okay, we went from point A to point C, and then from C to B. So AC plus BC, we want to see how much it is, okay, which is obviously 10 and 5, 15, minus the number we just came up with, and that's the answer. Okay. Again, as far as the decimals, you want to pay attention to how many decimals they want. I started with many decimals. I'm not putting as much, just on purpose. You really have to figure out how much. If they don't ask for decimals, put, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 decimals. Put many, many decimals, okay? Just to be on the safe side. All right, we are going to go to the next example class. We are to solve this equation, which is a rational equation, everybody. So first and foremost, we need to factor every denominator. In this case, this is fine, this is fine. You factor this one, okay? And it becomes x plus 1 times x minus 3. Now, x can't be negative 1, x can't be positive 3. Also, this one has the same answer. In other words, after you come up with this one, you make a decision because it may give you more that you got to be concerned with. Is everybody with me? Okay. Now, in order to solve this, you are going to multiply by LCD. The LCD is x plus 1, x minus 3. Now we are multiplying everything by this. So this side, this first fraction, x plus 1 cancels out, 5 times x minus 3. Okay. 5 times x minus 3. I hope everybody's comfortable with that. The second one, plus 1 times x minus 3 goes away, x plus 1. And the right side, everything goes away, just the numerator. So you have 5 times x minus 3 plus 1 times x plus 1 equals negative 6. Okay. And so you are going to distribute the 5. You get 5x minus 15 plus x plus 1 equals negative 6. 5x and x, they add up to 6x. So let's just write that. And then minus 15 and plus 1 is minus 14. And we move the negative 14, we make it positive 14 on the other side, becomes 8. The answer is 8 over 6, which means 4/3. And we check, we are in good shape. We check, everything is in good shape. Okay, everybody, everything is in good shape, not to worry. So we are going to move on. Okay, checking is extremely important. Let's discuss lines, slopes, interpretation here. As you recall, the slope by definition is rise over run. The average rate of change of y with respect to x. Rise over run. Now, how do we write rise over run? We can write delta, this is delta y sub 2 minus y sub 1. And this is delta x. Okay, so this is delta x, change in x. This is delta y. And as I mentioned, the average rate of change of y with respect to x. Let's look at a bunch of lines, see how they look like. Okay, so here's a horizontal line. A horizontal line has an equation y equals a constant with a slope which is 0, and then there's an intercept of 0 comma b. For example, this one is 0 comma 3. That's a horizontal line. The green line is a vertical line. A vertical line has an undefined slope, and the x-intercept, so there is no y-intercept, at, in general, if we call the equation x equals a, then it's a comma 0. In this case, happen to be 2. Okay, so vertical lines, okay, slope is undefined, and x-intercept at a 0. Okay. Equation of a line, we have a standard form ax plus by equals c. We have the slope intercept form y equals mx plus b, and the point slope y minus y1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. I hope everybody remembers those. Two lines are considered parallel if they have equal slopes but different y-intercepts. Two lines are considered perpendicular. They make a 90-degree angle at the point of intersection if their slopes are negative reciprocal of each other or their product becomes negative 1. This is just to give you the synopsis of the information so we can look at a few simple examples. Over here, we want to find the equation of a line, okay? So to find the equation of a line given 2 points, the very first thing to do is to find the slope. M is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So that means minus 6 minus 10 over 5 minus negative 3. So this becomes negative 16. This becomes positive 8. The answer is negative 2. Now all you have to do is use one of them. And y minus y1 equals m times x minus x sub 1 to come up with the equation of a line. So what do? Again, we're going to use only one pair. Let's say I'm going to use this one. So y minus 10 equals m, we found it to be negative 2, x minus negative 3, which makes it x plus 3. Y minus 10 is negative 2x minus 6, and we are going to add 10 to both sides, resulting in negative 2x, y equals negative 2x plus 1. Now here's what I want you to do, because that's the beauty of math. You can check your work. How? This pair was used. This pair was not used. Put it in there. If you replace the x with 5, you get negative 2 times 5, which is negative 10 plus 4 equals negative 6. You just checked your work. Everything is perfect. And that's the beauty of math. You can check your work, class. I highly recommend you do that, always. We want to come up with the equation of a line that is perpendicular to this one. So first, let's find the slope for this line, and then we take it from there. In order to come up with that, we divide both sides by number 3. And therefore, the slope for the given line, which we're going to call m sub 1, is 1/3. What is the slope for the line which is perpendicular to that? Is the negative reciprocal of this number, or simply put, -3. Using the point slope, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. We are coming up with the equation of a line. So y minus 1 equals m -3x minus -2, which makes it +2, right? We are going to add 1 to both sides, and it gives us y equals -3x minus 5. It's that simple, everybody. So we are using the information for linear equations to come up with the answer here. We want to come up with the equation of a line. If you happen to have two pairs where both of them have the same x coordinate, then x equals that number is your answer. It's a vertical line. Look at it. You don't have to work anything out. They have the same x coordinates. This is identical to this one. So x equals -2, you're done. On the other hand, if the y coordinates are identical, again, very simple, horizontal line, y equals 7. Y equals 7. Okay, class? Y equals 7. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next example. We want to look at an application. In essence, this is a mixture problem, if you will. A mixture problem because the total volume stays constant. A retired woman has $50,000, and that's the constant money we can't change. So we have $50,000, okay, but needs to make $6,000 a year from the interest to meet certain living expenses. One bond pays 15%. The rest of it, she wants to put in a CD that pays 7%. By the way, classic one is thinking, okay, why not all in 15%? There are other, factors involved, such as taxation and so forth, and limitations, okay? So if we let X be the amount the woman invests in the 15% bond, how much will she be able to invest in the CD? Set up and solve the equation for how much the woman should invest in each option to sustain a $6,000 annual return. Now, even if they don't give you A and B, the bottom line is you need to solve. Even if A and B is missing, if it's not there, just solve. You want to come up with the table as follows. So we're going to put some amount of money at 15%, some amount at 7%. We know the total is 50,000. Okay. How much are we putting at 15%? I have no idea. We're going to call it X. Okay. The interest follows I equals PRT. How much do we want? The total amount we are going to get is $6,000. That's what we are interested in. And so here's what I mean by a mixture problem. You really are mixing these two. No matter what you do, you are going to end up with 50,000. So for the sake of argument, let's say X is 10,000. Then the amount left would be 40,000. So 50,000 minus 10,000 is what you put here. And that I want you to pay attention to because sometimes students make a mistake. So what goes in here is 50,000 minus X. Okay. And all you have to do, add these 2x and negative x cancel each other, you get 50,000. So anytime you have doubts and you don't know what to put, just add them up. Do they add up to 50K? Okay. So how much do we put in one account? We don't know, but the other one is the total minus that. All right, let's calculate I equals PRT. Remember, T is equal to 1 class, okay? Is everybody with me? T equals to 1. Why is that? Let me highlight that for you, okay? A year, okay? So T equals to 1. This is year. Therefore, the amount of interest is the product of these 2 times 1. We don't have to write it. So it's just 0.15x. And this one is 0.07 times 50,000 minus x. So this is 0.15x. This is 0.07 times 50,000 minus x. We are hoping to get $6,000. So we are adding these two. And therefore, here's the equation. So we got the equation. Now we're going to solve. All right. This is 0.15x. We keep it 0.07 times 50,000. I hope you remember how to multiply decimals and powers of them. Just 7 times 5 is 35. This one has 4 zeros. This has 2 decimals. 1 decimal cancels out 1 zero. So we have 2 decimals. We have 4 zeros. Since we have more zeros, 4 minus 2, we have 2 more zeros. So 35, and we put 2 zeros. And of course, 0.07 minus 0.07x. Okay, so 7 times 5 is 35. This has 2 decimals. This has 4 zeros. There we have it. Okay, so again, take a look one more time. I want to make sure this has 2 decimals. And this one has 4 zeros. So we have 2 more zeros. That's why we have 1 and 2 zeros here. Okay, now what do? It's very simple. We combine these two. That gives us 0.08x, and we are going to subtract 3,500 from both sides. So 0.08x, 0.08x, everybody. There's an x missing class, 0.x, okay, is equal to 2,500. So x is missing, okay, that's a typo. 0.08x equals 2,500. We are going to divide both sides by 0.08. And by the way, as far as you know, the methodology, you add 2 zeros to the top and then you divide by 8. Okay, so in other words, this is the same as 2,500, and I'm going to add 2 zeros, and I drop the decimals in the denominator, okay, just in case. And then do the math. We end up with $31,250 when we do the math. And the rest of it, 50,000 minus x, okay? Okay. That means $18,750 comes from the 7%. So a quick recap. This is the general equation. For 15%, we put this much, 31,250. For 7%, we put this much. And that should result in a total of $6,000 interest. $6,000 interest. All right. Here's a question. Flora starts riding the bike at 20 miles per hour. After a while, slows down to 12 miles per hour and maintains that speed for the rest of the trip. The whole trip is 70 miles and takes 4.5 hours. For what distance did she travel at 20 miles per hour. So let's find that this is a class of problem known as a motion problem class. And the reason it's called a motion problem because it follows D equals RT. D is the distance, R is the average rate, T is the time. For example, you're doing 50 miles an hour. On the average, you covered 3 hours, 3 times 50, 150 miles. So anytime you have this, you got to come up with the table. So let's put in everything that we have, okay? So we're going to start, okay, rate RT distance. When we start at 20 miles per hour. After a while, we're going to go for 12 miles per hour, okay? The amount of time, so it says the whole trip, okay. So for what distance did she travel at 20 miles per hour? Okay, the time that she put doing 20 miles per hour, we don't know, T or X or whatever variable you want, okay? And the 12 miles per hour, we don't know, but we do know the total is 4.5 hours. And we know the total distance was 70 miles. So we let T be the time, okay, that is going to be for the 20 miles per hour case, okay? So what happens is the time is total of 4.5, so for this one would be 4.5 minus T. The distance covered here is the product of these two, 20 times T. And the distance for these two is 12 times 4.5 minus T. Okay. And the total distance is 70, so we can add these two and it results in 70. So the equation becomes 20T plus 12 times 4.5 minus T equals 70. And as long as we have this, I can't imagine not being able to finish that. It's a very straight forward question, okay? And so we multiply these two, we get 54. Let me just write at top of it. If we distribute, we get 12 times 4.5, which is 54, and then minus 12T. With 20T becomes 8T. We are going to subtract the 54. Giving us 8T equals 16 and T equals 2. So if T equals 2, we are interested in the distance, okay, when we did the 20 miles per hour, okay? So 2 times 20 gives us 40 miles of distance. Okay, class? So we covered 40 miles. All right. Here's the next question. We want to solve for one of the variables, in this case, specifically for W. Never mind the second part. That means we are going to subtract 2L, and then we're going to divide by 2. Now, before we move on, I want to make sure we understand what's going on here. We cannot drop these two. That's not how it works, because you have to factor out the 2 from both, and it doesn't happen. If you wrote this is equal to, let me just, if you wrote this is equal to P over 2 minus 2L over 2, and it results in P over 2 minus L equals W. You're absolutely correct, but pay attention to the fact you cannot drop the 2. Now, we replace the L with 15, okay, and the P with 58, and we find the missing width, okay, so 58 minus 30 is 28, divided by 2 is 14. The width is 14. The width is therefore equal to 14. All right, let's look at the following question. In order to perform the indicated operations, I want to remind you of this stuff. Class, pay attention to what I'm going to go over. This is important. Square root of -1. Okay, so I remember we're looking at the complex number in the form of a plus bi. Where square root of -1 by definition, we replace it with I, and therefore square root of -n becomes I squared of it. If you multiply these two, you get a squared plus b squared. Okay, I hope you understand why, because remember a plus b times a minus b is a squared minus b squared. Everybody remembers that, right? So what is this equal to? This is a squared minus b squared I squared, and I squared is -1. So that's why we have this, okay? How do you multiply this to? You just follow foiling first. So class, -1 times -2 is 2. Okay. -1 times 3i is -3i. 2i times -2 is -4i. 2i times 3i is 6i squared. And as I said, I squared is -1. So let me give you this. I is the square root of -1 by definition. If you square that, I squared is -1. If you cube that, I cubed is -i. Therefore, why is that? Because it's I squared, which is -1 times I. If you raise it to the power of 4, raise this one to the second power, you get +1. Okay, and pay attention to this. We will, discuss this concept and how we can simplify things. So powers of I, all of them have to be simplified as follows. Either they become I, or they become I squared, you change it to -1. They become I cubed, you change them to -i, or they become I to the power of 4, you change them to 1 accordingly. So what we are going to do, we're going to change this to -6. Now 2 and -6, they add up to -4, and these two add up to -7i. So the way you add them up, ultimately, it's very similar that just adding up like terms, just you have to take care of the powers of I accordingly. That's all there is to it, class, okay? All right. When we have this, there are several ways of discussing that. You can say simplify, you can say rationalize, or you can say put it in a standard form a plus bi. It all means the same thing. And to do that, ultimately to do the division, you multiply by the conjugate of the denominator and you divide by it. So whatever this one is, change this to plus and multiply and divide. Remember, this whole thing is equal to 1. You can't just multiply by anything, but you can multiply by 1, and that's okay. Which means the top you have to multiply just the way we worked here. That means we did what? That means we just distributed and observed, okay? We did the foiling. And now we are going to do the same thing here. So we are going to distribute and observe. So 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times I is 3i, 4i times 2 is 8i, and those two 4i squared. These two, we follow the shorthand. If you can't remember that, of course, you have to go through the process. I hope you remember that. A is 2, B is 1, so 2 squared plus 1 squared. And 4i squared, I'm going to change it to -4. Okay, so I'm going to change it to -4. Okay, I'm going to change this to -4. And now I can combine them accordingly, class. Okay, I can combine them accordingly. How? Well, 6 and -4, +2, 3 and 8, 11i, 4 and 1, 5. Now, if you left it as that, everybody, it is fine. However, if somebody asks you what is A and what is B and you couldn't answer, then you should put them in this format. It's better. 2 over 5 plus 11 over 5i. So A is 2 over 5 and B is 11 over 5. Okay. A plus BI. A is called the real part. B is called the imaginary part. How do you do this? First, you got to get rid of the negative. You can never do the operation when you have the negation. So you have to change that. And I hope you realize that this is 3i, right? 9 is 3, and the negative, we replace it with I. This is 3i, and this is 4i. So let's do that first. Now, these two, they give us 12i, and now we have a total of 15i. Again, to make sure we are comfortable with that, take a look at this one, I to the power of -6. There are several ways of doing that. One way is just to rewrite. Everybody remembers the exponential and the negative exponential rule. Okay, in other words, recall that a to the power of -m is 1 over a to the power of +m. And at the bottom is I to the power of 6. Now, here's what I want you to pay attention to. Anytime the exponent is larger than 4, divide the number by 4, okay, and just keep the remainder. So if I divide 6 by 4, the answer is 1 with the remainder 2. Divide by 4, keep the remainder. 1 over I squared is -1, 1 over -1 is -1. See how that works? I'm going to show you another simple example. This one. If you divide this number by 4, the remainder is 1. Why are we dividing by 4? This is the fastest way, everybody. 4, because I to the power of 4 is 1. So if you divide, so let me just show you here. 6 divided by 4, the remainder is 2. 1225 divided by 4, and I'm just interested in the remainder. The remainder is 1, so I to the power of 1, which is I. Here's another example. Let's divide 37, everybody. Let me use a different color on that. Okay, let's divide 37 by 4. Again, the remainder is 1. So this is I to the power of 1, or I. Let's do one more example. Okay, let me use a different color now. Let's say I to the power of 103. 103 divided by 4. We don't care what the answer is with the quotient. We are interested in the remainder. It's Q3, so it's I cubed. What is I cubed? -I. Okay, everybody? What is I cubed? -I. So I hope everybody is okay with that. Very straightforward, I hope. So the fastest way to get to the answer, divide by 4. Everybody divide by 4. Keep the remainder. That's all. That's how you do the math. Is this the only way? No. This is the fastest way. Okay. All right. Let's discuss a couple of things here. Let's start with the square root property. If x squared is a, then x is plus minus squared of a. Solving quadratic equation by completing the square. Okay. You basically take the constant to the other side. You make a equal to 1, and you add b over 2 squared, and then solve by the square root property. The reason why, okay, first, this example, x squared equals 49, class x is plus minus 49, okay? So that's something to remember, okay? Now, a perfect square trinomial is a trinomial that can be expressed as the square of a binomial. So take a look at this one. The idea is, with completing this square, is that what happens if this number is missing? I hope you realize this is b minus 10 divided by 2 is minus 5 squared is plus 25. And that's what is used for completing this square. I'm just giving you the synopsis of that fairly fast, everybody. Okay. And as I mentioned, just note that in every perfect square trinomial, the constant term is the square of 1/2 the coefficient of the x term, okay, or minus b, okay, over 2a, or simply b over 2a in general, squared, okay. So never mind the negative. Again, I will show you, doesn't have to be minus. All right, let's look at the quadratic formula. Let's refresh everyone's memory about that. Okay. Ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. This is in standard form. And we use x equals minus b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. This is the discriminant. A lot of interesting thing comes out of the discriminant. Number one, if it's positive, we have 2 distinct real solutions. If it's 0, we have 1 real solution. And if it's negative, we have no real solution, meaning 2 complex solutions or 2 imaginary solutions. Also, when you want to factor class, when you factor, what happens, it can't be factored if it's not a perfect square. So when it's a perfect square, it is really helpful, okay? All right, we want to solve by completing this square here. Again, just as an example to see how this thing works out, everybody. Let's see how it's going to work out. Okay, the very first thing we do is that we do 2 things. We want to get rid of the constant and we want to make sure a is 1, okay? So basically move the constant. And since a is 1, it's nothing we have to do, otherwise we have to divide by. Now, what is b? 6. Divided by 2, 3. Square it, 9. Okay, so 6, 3, square 9. We're going to add 9 to both sides. Again, I'm just refreshing your memory about this concept. This is x plus 3 squared. Now, what comes inside here? It is always b over 2. Let me just... The value of b over 2, including the sign, shows up here. If it's plus, you write plus 3. If it's negative, you write a negative 3. Practically, you're done. Okay. And that's the end of this story. As far as number 2 is concerned, or part B, if you will, okay, we are moving the constant first, and we are dividing both sides by a, because a is 2. So divide by 2. And now Look at this. What is the value of b? Negative 7 halves. On purpose, I picked something that's slightly, involved because it's a fraction. Negative 7 halves, I'm going to divide it by 2. It gives me negative 7 fourths. And if I square it, I get positive 49 over 16. So take a look. B is negative 7 halves. Okay, B is negative 7 halves. All right, B is negative 7 halves. When we divide it by 2, gives us negative 7 over 4. I hope you realize when you divide a fraction by a whole number, you multiply the denominator by it. So I'm going to multiply the 2 by 2 and I get 4. Now, if I square that, I get positive 49 over 16. We're going to add it to both sides. Okay. Now, what happens on the left side? Take a look. What did I say? You put b over 2 just the way it is in here. So in this case, z and whatever b over 2 is, including its sign. Okay. So minus 7 over 4. And now add up these two numbers. Okay. Now this is 2 times 16, 32, and 49 is 81. So take a look at what I'm going to put in there. Again, I'm going to show you with this color. B over 2, including the sign, sits in here. Okay? Always. You don't have to think about it twice. Now, the square root property says z minus 7 over 4 is plus minus the right side, square root of it, and 81 comes out as 9. 16 comes out as 4. So this is plus minus 9 over 4. So I'm going to put negative 7/4 on the right. It changes to positive 7/4. And then you get 7. Let me just show you here. 7 plus 9 over 4, or 7 minus 9 over 4. And they simplify to negative 1/2 and positive 4. Okay, negative 1/2 and positive 4, everybody. Very straightforward. Okay, I hope everybody's comfortable with that. Okay, we are solving by the quadratic formula, and I'm refreshing your memory about the formula for the quadratic. Everybody is comfortable with that, I hope. You can't use the quadratic formula unless you put it in standard form. Everything comes to the same side. And a is 2, b is 4, c is negative 5. Just plug in. So minus b, which is 4, plus minus the square root of b, or 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, c, which is negative 5. So just like that. It's a good practice to put the minus and then put the b in parentheses, because sometimes if it's negative, you want to be careful, okay, what happens to that, okay? Now, obviously, this changes to 4 squared, which is 16. This changes to plus 40. They add up to 56. Now, 56 is the product of 4 and 14. 4 comes out as 2. Now, it is important to understand this, because I've seen this happen with sometimes. You can't drop the 4 and 4. You have to factor out the 2 from the top and factor out the 2 from the bottom. So you divide everything by number 2. This becomes negative 2. This 2 goes away. This becomes positive 2. So you're factoring. In fact, here's how I would write that. You are factoring the 2 out. All right. Part B is in standard form. So we write A, B, C, very straightforward. A is 7, B is 4, and C is 3. And we plug it into the formula. We do the math. We square the 4. We multiply negative 4 by 7 by 3. And we end up with negative 4 plus minus the square root of negative 68 divided by 14. Negative 68 is the product of negative 1, 4, and 17. So let's see what happens. So negative 1, we change it to I, 4, we change it to 2, 17, we keep it. Okay. Now, pay attention to the I. On purpose, I put it on a different color. This I is outside, and sometimes, because it's hard to recognize that, they put them in between. So you want to follow what they want for you to receive the full credit. As far as I'm concerned, as long as you show clearly it's outside the square root, it's fine with me. Again, there is a common factor of 2. You divide everything by 2. This changes to negative 2. This goes away, and this changes to 17. And that's the final answer. Okay. I didn't write this for you. Okay. The next one, the way it is, you can't handle it. First, you have to put it in the form. You multiply by x squared. And by the way, x obviously can't be 0. That's important for everybody to know. And so when you multiply by x squared, now it's in the form that you want, where a is 2, b is 4, and c is negative 1. Put it into the formula. Again, this is being repeated. This is getting boring. I hope everybody's comfortable with that. And this is what you get, because this is 16. This is 8. 24 is the product of 4 and 6. So the 4 comes out as 2. And again, we can divide everything by 2. And this is the final answer. Now, what I want to explain, this is a perfect answer, class, and you're done. However, you can't divide by 2, okay? But you can cut them into 2 pieces, make it 2 fractions, and therefore this is another way of answering it. Both of them are absolutely correct. Again, you want to answer it accordingly for full credit, okay? We want to solve an absolute value equality, and I want to explain the methodology. The very first thing you have to do is to isolate, class. Okay, that's important, to isolate this. That's your first step. You isolate this. Because it is isolated, all you have to do is just write 4x minus 7 equals 5. 4x minus 7 is minus 5. And solve that. Move the negative 7, becomes positive 7. Divide by 4. 7 plus 5 is 12. Divided by 4 is 3. 7 minus 5 is 2. Divided by 4 is 1/2. So the answer is 1/2 or 3. It is a good practice to check it out. You really have to put it back into the original equation. For example, if I put 1/2, 4 times 1/2 minus 7 is equal to 2 minus 7 is equal to absolute value of minus 5. And yes, it checks. You must check your work. Don't touch the absolute value unless it is isolated first. Step 1, isolate. Then you can copy the same steps as the previous one. Step 1, isolate the absolute value. Now it's equal to plus minus 2. We are going to move the 5. Negative 5 goes to the other side, becomes 5. We are going to divide by 2. If we add 5 and 2, we get 7 halves. If we subtract, we get 3 halves. So the answers are 3 halves or 7 halves. So here's the synopsis of what you need to do. Isolate the absolute value so that the equation is in this form. If the right side is negative, you have no solutions. If it's positive, then go to the other steps, which means you write AX, you drop the absolute value, you say it's equal to C, and it's equal to minus C, and you solve both equations. Okay, class? And again, I believe I've gone over that for you already, okay? And so that's pretty straightforward. Okay. Let's look at inequalities. How do they work? Well, step 1 is the same, isolation. After it's isolated, for example, this one you want to solve, it's completely isolated. So the first step is already done for you. If it's less than, you can sandwich between the two numbers, assuming this is positive, and it is. So if A is positive. If it's negative, for the sake of argument, absolute value of 2x plus 3 less than a negative number, there is no solution, class, because absolute value is distance from 0. Worst scenario, it's equal to 0, but it can't be less than that. I hope everybody understands what I'm saying. Okay. And so you just sandwich between negative and positive 7. And you are going to get rid of the 3. And you are going to divide by 2. And this is the solution to this inequality. And this is the interval format. And it's an open interval because both sides, negative 5 and 2, the endpoints are not included. So you go with the number line, and you're going to go from negative 5 to 2. And you have two choices. At negative 5 and at positive 2, you can put parentheses or you can put a hole. Either way is fine, and you cover everything in between. Okay. Now, either way, this one or put a hole, something like this. Let me. Okay. You can show it like this. Either way is fine. All right. Here's the next one. And obviously, the first step is to get rid of positive 3. We are going to subtract 3 from both sides. We are going to divide by 2, both sides. And now, if this is positive and you're looking at absolute value larger than A, then you write it as follows. You drop the absolute value and say it's less than minus A, that means minus 5, and or this one is larger than 5. And of course, because it happened to have the equality, we keep the equality. By the way, it's important to pay attention to the endpoints. Do we have equality or not? Okay. If by any chance this A is negative, absolute value of X larger than a negative number, it's always the case. So there are infinitely many solutions. All real numbers work. If A is negative for this case, all real numbers. All right, so having said that, Now you are going to simplify by adding 1. We're going to add 1. Okay. And then we're going to divide by 3. And this is the inequality solution. Now, how do we write it in an interval form is this. Okay. So x is less than or equal to -4/3. So from -infinity to -4/3. Because of the equality, we put a bracket. Union, or means union. X is larger than or equal to 2. Start with 2, bracket because of the equality to infinity. What about a number line? So you locate -4/3. -4/3 is -1 and 1/3. So -1 and 1/3 is here and all the way to the left with either bracket or a solid point. And then from number 2 here to the right. So we have this. Okay, everybody? Again, pretty straightforward. Absolute value of 5x plus 7 plus 10 is less than or equal to 4. Remember, step 1, whether you're dealing with equality or inequality makes no difference. In the case of an absolute value, you have to isolate. That means get rid of the 10. That means subtract 10, everybody. And now, notice what happens. You end up with the following statement. Absolute value is less than or equal to a negative number. When it's negative, how could the absolute value be less than a negative number? It can't. No solutions. Okay. By the way, as far as no solution, sometimes we have this notation phi, which means an empty set, no solutions. Okay. No solutions, everybody. Let's look at more equalities. Whether you're dealing with an absolute value or a root function, the first step is the same, is isolation of this guy, okay? So you are going to move the 7. That's your first step, class. Don't do anything except isolating this first and foremost, okay? Now that is isolated, okay, how do you fix the root? You have to raise it to an appropriate power. In this case, to the second power. So the left side comes out, and the right side becomes x squared minus 14x plus 49. I hope everybody remembers a minus b quantity squared or a plus b quantity squared. I quickly remind you of that. Class, recall that a minus b squared is a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, and if we happen to have a plus sign here, this is a plus sign. Okay, you should be very comfortable with this stuff. All right, so we are going to bring everything to the right side, which means we are going to subtract the 2x and we are going to subtract the 1. We get x squared minus 16x plus 48. We want two numbers. The product is 48. The sum is negative 16. So this is a simple case of a factoring. X is either 4 or 12. And we must check how only with the original equation and nothing in between. So we're going to plug in 4 and observe. So when we plug in 4, 2 times 4, 8 plus 1 is 9. The square root of 9 is 3. 3 plus 7 is 10. Is it equal to 4? No. Therefore, 4 is out, everybody. How about 12? Let's find out. plug in 12. 2 times 12 is 24, plus 1 is 25, square root of that is 5. 5 and 7 is equal to 12. Yes, it checks. We are done. We checked both answers. One of them worked, one of them didn't. We are done. Always check your work. Check your work. Okay, everybody? All right. Okay, class. So now let's look at this example. We are going to square the left side. We get x squared plus 4x plus 4. And the right side, class, it's a simple foiling. If you multiply x by x, you get x squared. This gives you, let me just do the middle terms because I want to make sure that, everybody can see how we come up with negative 7x. This gives us minus x. This gives us minus 6x. They add up to negative 7x, okay? So we can cross out the x squared. They are identical. If I move the negative 7x, I make it positive 7x. If I move the 4, I make it negative 4. Okay, that's why we get 11x equals 2, x equals 2 over 11, and we are done. And hopefully everybody is happy. Okay, this is it, everybody. So let's look at the next example. 4x plus 1 to the power of 5/3 is equal to 32. Well, how do we do that? We can do it in one or two shots. We can, first of all, understand 5/3. You can raise it to the power of the reciprocal of that, which is 3/5 in one shot, or you can raise it to the power of 3 and then 5. And either way is fine because both of them are odd. Actually, there's really not much to it. Remember, when it's even, you want to be careful. So let's raise both sides to the power of 3/5. When you do that, the left side comes out as 4x plus 1, and the right side, let's write it as 32 to the power of 3/5. Okay. And a to the power of m over n is the nth root of a to the power of m is the nth root of a to the power of m. All of them are the same. And the reason I'm writing it this way, because I want you to see why the right side becomes that. Okay, why the right side becomes that. And now, the reason I'm writing it this way, because the fifth root of 32, we know this is 2. Okay, class? And therefore, 2 cubed is 8. And 4x plus 1 equals 8. 4x is 7. And x is 7 over 4. It's really simple. There is really not much to it. Okay, class? I hope everybody's comfortable with that. So we can move on to the next question. Well, there are several ways we can solve this. I'm talking about the first one. You can raise this to the power of 2, distribute, do the math, or the fastest and easiest way would be, because this is 3x minus 4, this is 3x minus 4, do it by substitution. Let 3x minus 4 be anything except x, class. For example, y. And so now you have 2y squared plus y minus 1 equals 0. Okay. You can factor this into y plus 1 times 2y minus 1. And so this gives you y equals negative 1. This gives you y equals 1/2. It is important for everybody to know we are not done. Why not? Because we don't care for y, we want x. And in order for you to solve for x, you got to replace the y here with these two numbers and find the x. So let's do that. So 3x minus 4 is either -1 or 1/2. So we are using this, okay? Three x minus 4 is -1 or 1/2. Now, of course, this one says 3x is what? 3, right? Because you add the -4 becomes +4, so x is 1. And this says 3x equals, if I move the -4, it becomes 8/2, and 1/2 becomes 9/2. And we divide both sides by 3, and we get those two answers. Okay, everyone? How about the next one? Well, the same thing. It's done by substitution method. You let x to the power of 1/3 be something. For example, y, z, m, whatever you like, it doesn't matter. If x to the power of 1/3 is m, then x to the power of 2/3 is m squared. So you have m squared equals 2m plus 3. Bring everything to the same side, factor. So you could, I mean, if it helps, you can write m squared is 2m plus 3, and then this step. Now here's the factored form, and m has two answers, 3 or -1. However, we are interested in x. If x to the power of 1/3 is m, everybody, then raise both sides to the power of 3, x becomes m cubed. So cube this one, 27, cube this one itself, and you really have to check. So I'm going to leave it for you to check it. That means put it back into the original equation. Make sure you come up with the correct answer. Okay, we are going to take this to the same side. We want to solve, so we're going to take this to the same side. You have a choice. You can do it by substitution, or maybe you recognize it can be done by factoring, just dealing with r squared, okay? Or as I mentioned, you can, if you want, you can say let r squared be, let's say, x, and then it becomes x squared minus x plus 15. Factor that and replace the x, okay, with r squared. So r squared is either 3 or 5, and r is plus minus square root of 3 plus minus square root of 5. There are four answers, everybody. There are four answers. Okay, there are four answers, and that's what you have. In the second case, you do the same thing. You do the substitution. Let b minus 1 be anything except b. For example, if it's x, then the left side becomes 6x squared minus 5x plus 1. Again, it's a very simple case of a factoring, everybody. I'm hoping everybody remembers the factoring from intermediate algebra and so forth. So x is equal to 1/2 or 1/3. When we have this one, please understand the following, class. B to the power of -1 means 1 over b. So if 1 over b is equal to x, that means x and b are reciprocals. So if x is 1/2, b is 2. If x is 1/3, b is 3. Okay. All right. Here's the simple example. A fitness club is charging us $20 monthly with $2 per day of use. We want to express the monthly cost in terms of daily usage. Okay. If we use x to represent the number of days, it is simply 2x plus 20. I hope you see it. It's a very straightforward class. We have a fixed cost, and that really becomes your y-intercept in essence. And you have a variable cost. It depends on how many days. If you use 1 day, they charge you $2 extra. 2 days, they charge you $4, so on and so forth. Okay. So this is the cost. That's really, the 2 becomes the slope. How about if we use it for 15 days, replace the x with 15, 30 plus 20, they're going to charge us $50. Okay. Again, pretty straightforward. There is not much to it. If the length of a rectangle is twice its width, okay, and the parameter is given as 90, we want to find the dimensions. So length is 2 times the width. The parameter is 2L plus 2W equals 90. We are going to replace the L with 2W. So this is going to be replacing this. So 2 times 2W gives us 4W. With 2W, 6 of them. We're going to divide by 6. And it results in the width being 15, and the length is 2 times that, 30 meters. So we end up with the width being 15, the length being 30. So it's important to check as follows, everybody. If you add these two, you get 45 times 2, you get 90. Remember, the P has this formula, also is the same as this one. And in this case, it might be easier to go with this. Add them up, 45 times 2, do we get 90? If we do, we are done. Because that's how we check. Because it's a good practice to always check.